Today I'm going to introduce you officially to a topic that we call writing about the disciplines. This is a new approach that we are doing here at UT Tyler, and it's the approach that really shapes the theory behind the textbook that you're using. So I'm going to go over the terms that we've been using already in the class. We use them for rhetorical analysis, for visual texts, and we're moving into the paper that you are going to write analyzing your academic article according to these terms of rhetorical analysis. So the terms are taken from the To the Student section. So I'll be going through them and talking about how they apply to academic texts, but if you need a refresher about what they mean, you can turn to that section, To the Student. So let's move into the first set of terms. These are some Greek words, ethos, pathos, and logos, which you may have heard before. And they're one way to talk about the rhetorical setup of a text. Remember, they're in that rhetorical triangle that we've come back to a couple of times. So when we're talking about academic texts, one of the main ways that an academic author will try to persuade the readers that he or she is giving information that's important and that they should believe the author's point of view is by establishing their credibility. And credibility means some pretty specific things in an academic context. So when we're looking at an academic article and thinking about how it demonstrates a certain kind of ethos, we're going to be thinking, how does the author build their credibility? In academic context, this could mean that they report about their experiment carefully. They've done an experiment and they use very detailed language, very careful language to talk about how they performed that experiment. They also might be showing concern for people or for the environment. So in other fields that don't do lab experiments, they might be talking more about people or about the environment, and they'll want to show some empathy or concern for the people who are the subjects of their writing, such as nursing or education. You probably would see this. Just in the way that they write, they might be making their prose easy for people to understand. So that's a kind of credibility that has a more broad appeal, rather than another way to write, which is you're writing with disciplinary jargon, to show expertise, and that's a narrower audience. And I'm going to be using rhetorical terms that you're familiar with in different contexts, and that just shows you how much overlap there is between these rhetorical terms. Let's talk about how you would use language relating to ethos in your paper, how you would work in this appeal to your writing when you write your paper about your academic article. So it's kind of hard to figure out how you should use this funny Greek term in your writing, so I'll give you a couple examples of how not to use it. How not to use it would be to say that a text or a part of a text has ethos. The ethos is not in the text, it's a quality that's demonstrated by the way the author wrote the text. So it's not appropriate to say that something has ethos or that it shows ethos, because you can think of the term credibility kind of as a synonym for ethos. So credibility is a little bit too vague. You want to talk about what kind of credibility, or credibility to what kind of audience. So I was just talking about how writing in a way that's easier for multiple audiences or for a broad audience to understand what you're saying demonstrates a credibility or an expertise to a wide range of people, not only experts in the field. But a slightly different kind of credibility can be shown, or that it's demonstrated in the writing if you're using lots of disciplinary jargon and you're not really concerned about appealing to a broad audience. You're really concerned about showing that you are a member of a very specialized group of researchers who all understand what this language means. So this is where ethos actually overlaps with text too. So I'll provide you a list of some ways that you can actually put your own sentences together when referring to these Greek terms, ethos, pathos, and logos, since they're not as familiar to you as something like structure or research. So just keep that in mind. We're talking about these concepts, but there is a specific way that you should refer to them in your own writing when you go to write the paper. Now let's think about pathos in terms of academic writing and academic argumentation. With any application of or analysis of pathos, you want to think, how does the author appeal to the reader's emotions or values? Pathos is not a very obvious appeal in academic writing, but you're always appealing to some kind of value, if not an emotion, in your reader. So one way to think about this is, does the author show empathy for other people? Like I was just saying, a person might be considered credible on that basis, or it might be, they might be trying to inspire empathy in their readers. So that's an appeal to pathos. Do they appeal to the value of objectivity in their research? So research that reads in a very dry way, it just sounds like scientists talking to scientists. They are writing that way because they value objectivity, and the language that they use makes it sound like they're more objective. Or they could be trying to build in a sense of urgency, especially in their introduction or conclusion, if they're trying to make their reader feel like, this is so important, we should do something about this now, not just think about something differently after we read the article. That's probably going to be a little bit more rare. You're probably going to find that the authors do write as if, I want to change your mind about something. I want to change the way that you think about this topic. But maybe you'll come across something that makes you feel more, not afraid, but like you should take some kind of action. That can be described as an appeal to pathos also. All right, when thinking about logos, this is probably the most important appeal in the rhetorical triangle that you're going to have a lot to say about, but it doesn't mean that there is only logos in the text. Again, I'll provide you a list of ways that you can talk about these appeals that's not just saying there is logos in this text. There is never not logos. So we're going to talk about some more specific ways to word that. But basically, when you're talking about logos in an academic text, the first question you want to ask and to figure out is, what is the argument? There is always going to be an argument. It may be stated explicitly in the text, or you may have to infer it, and kind of after you read, especially the introduction, conclusion, not the whole text, you should have an understanding of what it is that they're trying to argue. So the argument, what is the purpose? Are they trying to change your mind about something or change your action? Does it seem like they're mostly informing you about something, or can you tell that they are trying to persuade you of something? What reasons does the author give in support of the purpose? And then what evidence does the author give to support the reasons? So you can see how this kind of constructs a structure that you can think of it like a stool, where you have the top, the most important and prominent piece that gives the stool its function. It's the argument, or the point, the purpose. That's the top of the stool. But then it has these legs that support everything on top, and those are the reasons. The evidence, you can think of those as like the actual wood or the plastic that the stool is made of. The reasons have to include evidence, or they're not going to stand. The whole argument is not going to stand if there's no evidence. So with the logos part of the rhetorical triangle, like I showed in another presentation, you can kind of think of a list off to the side of the other rhetorical terms that we're going to take a look at in just a second, such as text and research. That could be synonymous with evidence, or evidence and research, and structure. So there's the physical structure and the way that the text is laid out, but there's the structure of the argument, which may not mirror the layout and the arrangement of the article. So to move on from the Greek terms into the ones that are probably more familiar to you, you can also use these terms maybe separately from the Greek terms or alongside, because there is overlap between all of these. So you'll want to analyze who the author is. So first, is there a single author? Is there more than one author? What is the background? So what is their expertise? You can research other things that they've published so far. And they'll probably be affiliated with the university. You should try to find that out, and where it is if they are affiliated with the university. Audience, like I've said throughout the course, is probably the most important thing that we in rhetoric have to think about, because you're always thinking about this text was created for someone, it had a purpose, they were trying to reach out to readers. Who are those readers? And how broad or narrow is that audience? So you could research where this text was first published. That'll give you a clue about if it was a journal, if it was a magazine, You might be able to find out who reads those kinds of publications. And so then you can find out what the characteristics of the audience are. Do you have to be a subscriber to the journal? Do you pretty much have to be a university to read this kind of article? Or can you just be someone who can access it, if not for free, then for, not very expensively? Now, when thinking about text, it's all text, but within this category, we can think about it more specifically as maybe what does the text look like? In other words, what are the formal features of the text? What form does it take? Questions asked about text are, what does the layout look like? So you can describe, the number of columns. Is it all on a single column, or is it double column? If you're looking at scientific articles, it's often double columns. Is the text interrupted by images, such as photographs or drawings? Or are there charts, tables, and graphs to communicate quantitative data visually or very efficiently? Also, you might think about if there are footnotes or endnotes to show sources, or do they all appear at the end of the article? So, of course, this overlaps with the kind of research that's done and the kind of evidence that's shown. But if you're thinking about, looking at the actual paper and the words or the images on the paper, how can you describe that? That's actually going to vary quite a bit from discipline to discipline. You also have the purpose. So we've talked about this in terms of the way that the logos functions in the text. What is the point? What are they trying to accomplish? You might also think of this as, what is their thesis or their hypothesis? Do they make a hypothesis at the beginning of the article and then prove or disprove it by the end of the article? Structure can be overlapping a little bit with both logos and text, because it's thinking about the structure of the article. But you can think about it in terms of space. What are the main sections of the article, and are there headings that delineate one section from another? One very common way for an article to be structured is according to a scientific research report or lab report, but that structure has gotten much more commonly used in other disciplines, even though it originated in the sciences. So this structure is called the IMRAD structure. The I stands for introduction, and then method, results, and discussion. A lot of you will find that those headings are actually in your article. If they're not, you can see that that's basically the way the article is arranged, even if the sections are not called introduction, method, results, discussion. So look for that. If it's not arranged like that, that's something that you can comment about too. So if it's not the IMRAD, what appears at the beginning, what is in the middle or makes up the body of the article, and then what is at the end? You also can think about how long is the article. As you're flipping through the different articles in your book, you can see that there can be some variation in that. And then the last rhetorical term, but they're all important, but this is one of the most important because it's something that really separates academic writing from other types of writing. It's the fact that academic writing is often representing new research, and it also relies very heavily on other people's research. So the questions that you can ask of a text in your description or your analysis of it are, what kind of research methods did this author use? When you interact with your colleagues or your classmates, you'll be able to get their take on how their authors did their research, and that can vary quite a bit. One basic distinction is, did they use quantitative research methods or qualitative? Quantitative, you can probably tell, refers to quantities or numbers. And so basically, did they count things? That can be a type of quantitative research method. Qualitative sounds kind of like the word quality. So that's describing things or talking about the way things are or appear or the way things happen that doesn't necessarily use a lot of numbers. So that's one basic distinction that you can make. Another is, how often and where does the author cite the research of others? In some articles, it might be mostly at the very beginning of the article. And others, it might be mostly in the middle, throughout the body of the article. You probably won't find a lot of that at the end. But also, how often do they do it? Are there big clumps of citations? Is it kind of sprinkled throughout? Do they have 50 works that they cite that are at the end of the article, or do they cite more like 10? And what kind of evidence does the author use to accomplish their purpose? That could be categorized as quantitative or qualitative, or it may be, there may be more choices like, do they use anecdotes? Do they use personal testimony? Do they measure things? Do they go out and interview people? Do they use text as their evidence? So I'm in the field of writing and sometimes literature, and we read texts and we quote lines, phrases and words from those texts, and that is our evidence. We don't necessarily measure things or go outside or even really talk to people. We sit in a dark room and read books. So evidence can take a lot of forms, and that's something that you can analyze under the heading of research. But again, the evidence really supports the argument that is the part of the logical structure or the logos of the text. So don't be too worried about, when you're looking at the way a text is written, which category to put it under. It could go under several. So especially when you're thinking about how to organize your own paper, what paragraph to talk about, what feature, don't stress out too much about it, because it probably could go any number of ways. So just come up with ideas, gather evidence for the types of for the analysis that you want to do, and then just try it. You may try to fit it in a paragraph, like talking about the evidence and logical structure, but then you kind of have too much to talk about, so you might want to put evidence and research in its own. Or you might want to talk about the evidence in terms of how the author tries to bolster her credibility for an academic audience by including lots of research, or maybe not lots of research, but understanding the research of others in a very deep way. So don't fret too much about where it should go in your paper or what label to give it. Just as long as you have close attention to detail and then you have evidence to back up what you say, and your evidence is going to be textual evidence, then it'll be okay. So we've moved on from a simpler kind of text, from the visual text that you've already analyzed, and the academic texts in your book are definitely difficult. They are complex and they are dense, but you can do it because you've practiced how to do a rhetorical analysis. You can break this text into chunks. You need to understand it pretty well, so that means looking up words that you don't understand, which we've also talked about. And you still have time to try out informally some first attempts at analyzing your academic text, and you'll get feedback on that from your peers, from me. You'll see how your text differs from other text in the textbook by looking at it and by talking with your classmates online. So don't worry. This is, it's hard to do, but it's worth doing. It's going to help you in your other classes, and the skill of analysis and providing evidence for what you say is something that's going to stay with you even after college. So I look forward to seeing your discussion about these concepts and to seeing your first attempts at rhetorically analyzing your academic article, and I will see you in the next session.